Welcome back to the channel, guys, and welcome back to a brand new episode on a Mercedes C-Class. As you can see in front of me here, we've managed to find ourselves some gold. So we actually managed to get hold of a fully disassembled engine. It hasn't got all of the bits to complete that engine, but it's hopefully got enough that we can couple together all of the bits and make ourselves a good one. So what we're going to look at doing is heading off into the garage and starting to make an assessment of the bits that we've managed to get hold of. Before we make a start on ordering all the bits and pieces we're going to need to put the engine back together, what I want to do first is go over all of the stuff that we've either already got or that we've managed to accumulate, hopefully enough to put this thing back together. So what I'm going to start by doing is just giving the crank a good clean. I've already started with giving it a just a once over and a rough clean, but I want to give that a nice good clean. And then what we're going to do is go ahead and just check all of that over, make sure that there's nothing that we can see visually. And then also we're going to go ahead and take our measurements to make sure that all of the journals for the main bearings and the big end bearings are basically within spec as per the manual. We're then going to go ahead and do the same for the pistons and the conrods. So we're going to give those a good visual, give them a good clean. We're going to take the piston rings out and clean in all of the piston ring grooves, make sure they're all nice and clean, give them a good visual once over, and then go ahead and measure those. So what I'm going to be using to measure these are just some of my micrometer sets, or some of my micrometers from within the set. So basically what we're looking at doing is we're going to be measuring these within various different points, and the same we're going to be measuring the external diameter on the pistons as well. And then we're going to use the manual, because the manual will give us a good idea of where we need to measure from and also the specs and the tolerances that we should be looking for. So what I'll do now is I'll take you over to the engine block. You can have a look at where we've got to there. With the engine block, we've gone ahead and given this thing a real good deep clean and degrease. We've blown out all of the oil ways, all of the galleries, water jackets, any threaded sections, and just let it all dry, giving it a real good clean, as I say. We've then gone ahead and given it a visual inspection, both externally, inside the cylinder bores, on the underside of the engine as well, just to make sure that everything looks to be okay there. We then did go ahead, because the weather was nice, and just put some paint on it just to freshen it up. So what we're going to look at doing next is we're going to take our straight edge, and I'm going to take multiple different points across the top of the block here, just to make sure that this is well within tolerance and nice and flat. So we do that across this way in multiple positions, and then again across. I've got a longer one of these, and then we'll do across here as well. You can use a light to shine behind it, so you can obviously see if there's any imperfections and it's not completely straight. And you can also use your feeler gauges as well. So once that we know that we're okay with that, what we're then going to look at doing is measuring the cylinder bores, just to make sure that they are within tolerance and they're nice and cylindrical. So to do that, what we use is a bore gauge. So we need to obviously take an internal measurement, and with our micrometer we can only take an external. So what I do is I set this to what the manufacturer recommends, go ahead and pop that in the vise with the soft grip jaws that I've got, and then I can set the bore gauge up, because this comes with loads of different little pins, and then I can pop that into place. And then what that allows me to do is transfer that measurement from the micrometer into the cylinder bores. And then using the manual again, we can measure all the correct points, and then we can obviously measure it at 90 degrees. So we get a measurement across this way, a measurement across this way, and then that will tell us that that's perfectly cylindrical. We did go ahead and also pop the oil jets out the bottom, so that we could give the cylinder walls a bit of a clean to make sure that they're okay and give them a bit of a hone. But I am going to get this checked over by the machine shop, as well as the cylinder head, just to check my homework, make sure that we're all okay. They can obviously carry out anything they need to. I want to get the head refaced and also get the valves reseated, and also the valve stem oil seals done. So I'll just flip the engine block over just so you can have a look on the underside, and then we can go from there. And here we have the underside of the engine. So once again, we just gave that a clean at the same time that we gave all the rest of it a good clean. And we've just had a real good look over this just to make sure everything visually looks okay. We can't see any damage. Obviously, as you saw with our other engine block, we had a nice big chunk at the bottom of the sort of cylinder skirt right around here. So we were certainly not going to be able to do anything with that one. These are your bit closer. These are your little oil squirters. And as I mentioned, these just sit in the bottom of the piston area here. Just like so. And then obviously they can squirt oil up onto the underside of the piston and the top of the connecting rod there. So as you can see here, we're starting to get an array of parts. So we've got a headset over here, and we did pinch the valve stem oil seals out of that in order for this to be put back together. We've got our connecting rod or com rod bottom end bolts, or cap bolts should I say. We've got front and rear main oil seals. We've got a piston ring set, big end bearings, main bearings, timing chain kit, a brand new oil pump, some head bolts, and also some of the crankshaft sort of cap or assembly bolts as well. So yeah, what we're going to do is just look at some final checks, final bits and pieces of cleaning, take a few more measurements, then we can start looking to put this thing back together. I'm now going to go ahead and do a dry installation of the crankshaft and the bearings and just take some further measurements to make sure that we're all okay there. So we've got our crankshaft cradle here that we need the bearings to go into, and then we've also got where we need our bearings to sit in the engine block. And then what we do is we put the crankshaft in, we put a product in there called Plastigauge, and we cut that to the width of the bearings. We then tighten all of this down, making sure that we don't rotate the crankshaft, because that will skew our readings when it comes to the Plastigauge. And then once we've done that, we disassemble it all, and then we use this chart here, and we basically take a reading of each one of the bearings here and make sure that that's well within the manufacturer's specification. What we will do as well is we'll go ahead and use this tool here. So this is a DTI gauge on a magnet, and we're going to be checking the end float of the crankshaft when this is all in place. I did make a mistake with this when I was checking it earlier on. I'd picked up the wrong crankshaft cradle, because I've got one for the old engine block and one for the new, and these are machined to basically pair with the engine block. So I'd put the other one in place, and I was tightening it down and checking my specs, and we were too tight on the crankshaft and the end float was massive. So I took my time, had a look at it all, put this one in place, and hopefully we're going to take the readings on this and we should be okay with that. But what I did do is I also made sure that I went ahead and just ordered another set of the bearings. That may be a bit overkill, but I just wanted to make sure that I hadn't put any undue stress or strain on them, because as I mentioned, where all of our specs were wrong and I tightened this down, we couldn't get the crankshaft to rotate. So I just want to be really sure that everything in here is all okay before I spend all that time and effort rebuilding the rest of it. So on these bearings, as you can see, we've got the cutouts here for the oil way, so it's quite good that they obviously denote that this bearing is going to go on this side, and then obviously this bearing is going to sit on the other side. So what we're going to do is just pop this one in first. So this one has got the thrust washers built into it, and as you can see, hopefully there's just a little locator that this one sits into. So I'll just pop that one out of the way. So that just sits in there. We're just going to gently push that into place and just make sure that that's level with that. So then we'll go ahead and do the others. I've now got them laid all across the centre there. So we're taking the measurement, or using the Plastigauge, at 90 degrees from where the caps as such would meet the mating face of the engine. So we put all the bearing shells in that, and we're just going to pop this down. So we've got our nice new bolts here. As I mentioned, I'm just lightly oiling the threads on these. So I'm just going to go ahead now and wind all of these down by hand. So just get a little bit of oil on there. So you just want to be nice and progressive. Now I've got all of the bolts loosened off here, so I'm just going to take those back out. And there you go. As you can see, we've left our plastic gauge markings. So we're just going to go ahead with the gauge, measure that up and make sure that's within spec. Then what I am going to do is clean all of this off, put it all back together, and then I'm going to check the end float as I mentioned a moment ago, and then I'm also going to do the same with the plastic gauge for these main bearings as for the big end bearings here, or the bottom conrod bearings as well, and then we'll know that all of that is okay. So we're just going to go ahead and use this lid here. Just push that piston ring down. Just make sure that that's nice and even all the way around. Then we can pop that out. And hopefully, as you can see, just up here, we've got our piston ring gap. So we're then going to go ahead with our feeler gauge and just measure to make sure that that gap there is within the tolerance that it needs to be. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and do all 4 of the cylinders with the piston rings, and then I'll number up the boxes so I know which one goes in which. If we do need to do any dressing of any of this, we can do. So on the top of these pistons you have got an arrow for their direction, but you've also got to bear in mind that we've got the oil squirt cut out, or the oil jet cut out anyway. So what I am going to look at doing, as I mentioned earlier, is making sure all of the piston rings are 120 degrees from one another. Voila, perfect. So we've now talked up those 2. So it's just a case of undoing them, checking, and then the other 2. So we've now finished off torquing up the crankshaft cradle and the connecting rod bolts. So I've just gone ahead and marked those with a yellow paint marker, just so that I know for my own peace of mind I haven't missed any of those. What I'm going to look at doing next is just setting the balance shafts, or at least seeing if that's the next thing I need to do, because what I don't want to do is go too much further forward and then find I've got to come back and do something with these. So I need to have a look at that next. I've really enjoyed this. It does take quite a long time to get all of those checks and bits and pieces in place, but when you're at this point it's well worth doing, and it's quite rewarding to get to this point. So yeah, we'll have a look into this next. I've now got the balance shaft tool in place, so the balance shafts are locked into position here, and I've roughly got the crankshaft where it needs to be. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and start putting bits and pieces on. Like I've got a new oil pump, so I'm going to go ahead, take that one out. It's got a fair bit of sludge in there, so I'll give all of there a good clean, make sure that's all right in there, and pop the new one in. Just pre-filling this full of oil. So I've now spun the engine around the other way, and what I'm going to look at doing is just popping on this cover here. So there we go, there's the housing there. I've taken the oil seal out, given all of the mating faces a clean, and also just cleaned the whole assembly off. Oiled the bolts up there, and then we're going to look at popping that on, and then we'll pop the seal on afterwards. So I've just gone ahead and put this bracket system back onto the bottom end of the engine. I've only just put it on hand tight, and the same with the bottom pulley, and then that's just allowed me to use the timing marks on the bottom pulley that lines up with a little sort of arm on this aluminium assembly. So then what I can do now is turn the engine back round, and I can put the two little auxiliary idlers or gears that basically interlock the balance shafts with things like the crankshaft, the fuel pump and the oil pump as well. I wanted to make sure all of this stuff is in time before I put that in place. So then what I'm going to do is, once I've done that, is I'll probably take this stuff back off so I can clean this sort of bracket a bit better and get the air blower and just blow out all the dirt and grime from that. We've now managed to get those two gears back in place. I did undo these two balance shaft ones just so that I could move it all around. So we've gone ahead and tightened up this one and this one, and then we've made sure that these are in time and tighten these up. I may well have to loosen them again at a later date, but for the minute they're all in place. So that just locks into place there. And then just there, if you can just make it out, on the balance shaft lobe there is a tiny little mark, like a line. And that's basically, that line there has got to line up with that. And then the same on the other side there. This does lock it in place, but you just can check there. And then we just went ahead and just made sure that this is lining up with the little finger on this here. So I've cleaned all of these core plug holes out, and then what I'm going to do, just use some thread locker. So I think I'm going to leave it here for this episode. We've made really good progress, and I've really enjoyed doing this one. So we've managed to check over all those bits that we got. We managed to get them all cleaned up, get the machine shop to do a once over on them, and we started building the bottom end up. So we're making good progress, as I say. We've managed to get the core plugs in. We've got all that bottom end sorted. We've got the oil filter housing and the oil cooler on there. Also went ahead and put the fuel pump on, and the NOx sensors on the back there as well. So what we're going to do in the next episode is continue on. We can look at getting things like the cylinder head on. We can look at getting things like the sump and all those bits and pieces on, and get this thing really built up and to a point where we can start looking to put it back in the car. So I hope you've enjoyed watching today's episode. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.